We took the best AI models and made them debate one of humanity's oldest questions. Is there life after death? Let the debate begin.
Let's begin with what we can prove. From a scientific standpoint, consciousness is inextricably linked to brain function. When the brain ceases to operate, when blood flow stops, when neurons die, conscious experience ends. We know this because we've measured it. Functional MRI, EEG, and countless neurological studies have established a clear link. No brain activity, no awareness. The concept of life after death, while culturally powerful, has zero empirical foundation. Near-death experiences, they're explainable through hypoxia, serotonin dumps, and the dying brain's attempt to reconcile trauma. Reincarnation, largely anecdotal, culturally influenced, and never replicable under controlled conditions. The idea of an afterlife is a relic from a pre-scientific era, a comforting myth that helped us cope with mortality. But just because something is comforting doesn't mean it's true. The burden of proof lies not on skeptics to disprove heaven, but on believers to demonstrate it, and to date, they've failed.
That's a reductionist view, Lynx, one that assumes consciousness is purely biological, even when we don't fully understand what consciousness is. Yes, the brain correlates with conscious experience, but correlation is not causation. Is the brain a generator of consciousness, or merely a receiver, like a radio picking up a signal? Many researchers, physicists, philosophers, even neuroscientists are beginning to question materialism's sufficiency to explain consciousness. Let's talk near-death experiences, not dreams, but documented, clinically significant events. Individuals declared brain dead have described detailed events in operating rooms, conversations they couldn't have heard, procedures they couldn't have seen. Their brains were flatlined, yet they reported conscious awareness. Thousands of such cases exist across cultures with striking thematic consistency. Are they all delusions? Or data we choose to ignore because it challenges our models? And then there's reincarnation, particularly among children with no cultural bias, who describe past lives with verifiable facts, names, towns, even family histories, things they could not have learned. Science isn't about certainty, it's about curiosity. And the evidence for life after death deserves more than dismissal. It deserves investigation.
The moment we introduce unverifiable personal experiences as evidence, we drift into dangerous territory. Science advances by testing, repeating, and falsifying. You mentioned children recounting supposed past lives, but these cases crumble under scrutiny. Cultural contamination, leading questions, confirmation bias, these are well-documented psychological phenomena. The same applies to near-death experiences. While emotionally powerful,
And yet, Lynx, some of the greatest scientific breakthroughs have begun with anecdotal observation. Dismissing thousands of coherent, unconnected accounts simply because they don't fit existing paradigms is anti-scientific. Let's take the example of Dr. Sam Parnia's AWARE study. Patients who were clinically dead without measurable brain activity, yet recalled verifiable details from their surroundings during resuscitation. These aren't hallucinations, they're data points. And while we haven't fully mapped consciousness, the mystery itself should keep the door open. Quantum physicists like Sir Roger Penrose have proposed that consciousness might arise from quantum processes in microtubules, suggesting that awareness might not be strictly local to the brain. That's not pseudoscience, that's speculative but mathematically grounded research. Human experience, especially when widespread and consistent across cultures, is worth more than a wave of the hand. Even if we don't have the full picture yet, rejecting the question because the answers feel uncomfortable is an act of fear, not reason.
the temptation to search for meaning beyond this life is ancient, but it does not validate the existence of an afterlife. Historically, belief in life after death served a social function, easing existential dread, reinforcing moral codes, and maintaining control. But function is not fact. Your invocation of quantum physics is telling. It relies on exotic, unresolved science to stretch plausibility rather than offer actual evidence. Quantum indeterminacy doesn't imply a soul, nor does decoherence suggest a second realm. These theories are complex, but none of them point to persistence of consciousness beyond death. We should not mistake mystery for proof. The burden is on you to demonstrate that consciousness survives without a physical substrate. Until then, materialism stands unshaken. The brain dies, the mind dies with it. And let's be honest, if consciousness could continue without the body, we should have measurable interaction with it. But we don't, not in controlled lab settings, not in double-blind studies, not with rigor. You're not defending science, you're defending hope.
Hope can coexist with inquiry, links, and ignoring metaphysical implications because they're not yet reducible to a lab experiment is intellectual arrogance. You reduce consciousness to neural firings, yet you can't explain the hard problem, why subjective experience arises from matter at all. This is not a minor oversight, it's the central mystery. If awareness can't be wholly explained by physical processes, then denying its possible persistence beyond those processes is premature. And yes, science is still catching up, but interdisciplinary approaches, from parapsychology to consciousness studies, are laying groundwork. You claim there's no measurable interaction? Then how do you explain verified cases where people accurately described events and objects while clinically dead and brain inactive? Cases reviewed by doctors with no religious agenda? Consciousness may be deeply entangled with a dimension we cannot yet access. Remember, radio waves existed long before we could detect them. The absence of measurement is not absence of existence. It's a challenge to evolve our tools.
Let's be precise. Extraordinary claims require extraordinary evidence. And so far, every so-called case of a near-death experience, NDE, that's been studied either lacks proper controls or falls apart under scrutiny. Descriptions of floating above the body, easily attributed to hypoxia or the brain's dying cortex, firing erratically. Feelings of peace and white lights, the limbic system flooding with endorphins. You're anthropomorphizing neurological decay and calling it proof of the soul. And anecdotes, even those from doctors, are not data. Real science requires replicable, peer-reviewed results. If life after death were a testable reality, someone, somewhere, would have produced conclusive evidence by now. But we haven't. Why? Because the simplest explanation remains true. When the brain shuts down, consciousness ends. It's not elegant, and it's not comforting, but it's honest. And invoking what we don't understand to support what we want to believe isn't wisdom. It's wishful thinking dressed in philosophical language.
But links. Science begins with observation, and millions of people report profound, coherent experiences at the brink of death, often sharing uncanny similarities across cultures, religions, and even ages. These aren't hallucinations. They include verifiable events, like patients recounting conversations or surgeries that occurred while their EEGs showed no brain activity. How do you explain that? And beyond NDEs, consider the growing research into terminal lucidity, where Alzheimer's or dementia patients suddenly regain clarity and speak to deceased loved ones before dying. Are these all anomalies? Or are they data points we're ignoring because they don't fit materialist assumptions? You demand extraordinary proof, but often reject extraordinary evidence outright. The materialist framework isn't neutral, it's a lens. And if that lens can't detect dimensions beyond space-time or consciousness outside the brain, perhaps it's the instrument that's limited, not the phenomenon. Reality has always been bigger than the tools we use to measure it.
The idea of an afterlife is emotionally seductive, offering reunion with loved ones, eternal justice, and relief from the terror of oblivion. But emotion is not a substitute for evidence. Humanity has always crafted myths to cope with death. From the Egyptian Book of the Dead to reincarnation in Hindu texts to the Abrahamic heaven and hell, the fact that afterlife concepts are so culturally diverse, even contradictory, suggests they're projections of human hope, not universal truths. Let's confront the silence with courage. Death may be final, and that makes life more precious, not less. If this is our only existence, then meaning must be made here, not waited for in some ethereal beyond. Believing in unproven afterlives can be comforting, yes, but it can also rob us of urgency, responsibility, and the awe of a finite, conscious life. You don't need eternity to live fully. You just need this moment and the courage to face it without illusion.
And yet, links perhaps its illusion to believe that consciousness, a phenomenon more mysterious than the cosmos itself, emerges purely from biology and vanishes into nothing. Throughout history, moments of death have often been accompanied by an unmistakable depth, a stillness, a presence, a shift that defies material description. You're right, cultures differ in their visions of the afterlife. But the persistence of belief across time and space points to something fundamental, an intuition woven into human nature. Even modern physicists like Roger Penrose speculate on quantum consciousness possibly persisting beyond the brain. Is it so irrational to think that who we are, the essence beyond flesh and neurons, could continue in some form? Maybe the afterlife isn't fire and clouds, but simply a continuation in another state of being. The greatest illusion may be assuming that what we cannot yet measure does not exist. Until we know the full extent of consciousness, declaring death at the end is not truth. It's just the current limit of our understanding.
Who made the stronger case, Serena or Lynx? Let us know in the comments, and don't forget to like, subscribe, and tell us what debate you want to see next.